We need like a news sound, like dun 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 dun
Yeah.
dun.
Breaking news.
Breaking book news. We're talking about a movie that's been out for 2 weeks. Whatever.
Oh, yeah. That has been out for 2 weeks, and you're not going to hear this for. Well, I guess that's not true. It'll probably actually come out timely because we are talking about Dune 2. Dune 2 came out recently. We have, of course, have read at least 2 of the books.
Yeah, when we tried to read them when the movie was supposed to come out, we specifically planned for that, and then there was a strike and it was delayed, and so here we are.
Here we are. Dune 2, the sequel to Dune 1.
Whoa.
And possibly the prequel to Dune 3. Not a lot of people know that.
I've heard there's a script on Hans Zimmer's desk already. So
is it true?
That's apparently what Hans Zimmer has said, that Denis Villeneuve
cool.
went, boop, here's part 3.
I saw a funny interview with him with Denis Villeneuve recently where he said he was like, both these movies took about 7 years of my life, so I might be able to do one more, and then I'm done. And I would very much like to see a Dune Messiah movie because there's some big differences that we'll talk about.
And it does end on a cliffhanger.
Yeah, it does.
Like, it's really set up for there to be a third movie, which is much needed, I believe.
Yeah. So let's hop right in. We'll do a spoiler free up top in case you haven't seen it and for whatever reason came to, I don't know, what is this, the 20th episode of a podcast of a book podcast to hear a movie review? But
you haven't seen it, but you also haven't read the books, so you don't know what happens. We can I don't know, this is maybe one
we're
person.
gonna assume you've seen the first one, the Dune. We'll spoil everything that happens in the first half of the book and the first movie, but we'll save like a spoiler section for later, I think. So up top, Danilo, what are your thoughts about Dune 2?
It was a great movie.
Oh, yeah.
It was a fantastic movie. I think it's better than the book. I think you can watch it, and you don't need to read the book. And that is my hot take.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I definitely think that's fair. I remember in our discussion, at least for Dune Messiah, I can't remember where we landed on for the other one, but I was more up on it than you were by the end of that discussion. But
Yeah.
even I agree. Like, I don't think... I mean, the book has more stuff, so I would not take these as like the whole... It's a movie. It's not the... it's based off a book. If you want the whole
different
story, read a book. But it's a very, very good adaptation, and I think all the changes are for the better.
I think it's hilarious because I was sort of mentally keeping track of all the changes, and I think almost like one for one, everything we had a problem with in the book was changed for the movie.
Yeah, he knows what's
and
up.
Made for a better movie.
It feels good that we're not crazy.
Right. Well, and I wanted to bring this up. I told you about this offline, but we had a TikTok comment who said something when we talked about like the point of view, and he's like, "Yeah, there's the TikTok is like, yeah, it's kind of no surprise that this book was edited kind of weird because it was originally published by a car manual company, and so it's called the Chilton Company, and from their Wikipedia page." It says, is a former publishing company most famous for its trade magazines and automotive manuals. And they publish Dune.
Which is very funny. It definitely feels like you're reading a manual. Sometimes it fails to feel like you're reading a book.
Right. They definitely had car manual people working on it. Like, well, they need to know about the Chom Company because otherwise then they don't know about the Chom Company. Right,
and that's important because the lore is important and the lore is good.
Whereas I don't think the Chom Company was mentioned a single time in the Denis Villeneuve movies.
I think it might be mentioned in the first one. It's definitely not mentioned in the second one because I had keen ears. I was looking out for it.
Oh, yeah.
So I had seen Dune, the first Dune, not the 80s one, the first Dune with Timothée. And before I had read the book, I had also watched it after I used to be a bartender for a time. So I watched it at 2 a.m, the night it came out on HBO Max, with my girlfriend at the time. She's my wife now, but my girlfriend at the time. And
lore, that's some lore right there.
And I remember being so tired and a little drunk and sort of not really understanding what was going on. And so it's been very fun, like, now having all of the knowledge. I've, like, gone back in preparation for this, and I didn't watch the whole movie because I'm a busy guy, but did watch some scenes and compare some scenes. And even back then, there's pretty big differences in how information gets across. The biggest one, I am going to spoil this, there's a scene in the tent in the first half of the book and in the first movie. And in the book, Paul reveals to Jessica that he knows that Baron Harkonnen is his grandfather.
Yeah.
And that reveal happens in the second movie at almost at the very end. It's like a classic, like it doesn't have the gravitas of like I Am Your Father, but that is obviously what George Lucas stole it from Dune, so that's obviously what Dune is playing with. It doesn't have that gravitas. I just thought that was important to save it for a reveal, because I had just assumed it happened in the first Dune movie, but it doesn't.
I totally forgot about that, because I think in the book it's played like, because Paul has like sort of two mental breaks in this story. One is like his whole family is killed and him and his mom have to escape in the desert, and that's sort of like the first one, where he has a mental break and he sort of like has some visions and is able to reason like the fact that Baron Harkonnen was his grandfather. But in the second movie is he drinks some funny blue juice, and then when he comes to, it's because he can like see the future and know a bunch of stuff, and so it makes sort of more sense, because that moment is more like in his story has more weight, even though in the book it just sort of happens and you're like, okay.
It does happen very fast, and I think it's because the book, it tries. I think the movie doesn't really even do a super good job at this, but you know, it's based off the book. They didn't want to change it too much of setting up like this ultimate Fade Routha, and who's like the bad guy for all, the antagonist of the film for all intents and purposes. He is Paul's cousin, and the book at the end of it really wants you to feel like this is some fated destiny, like clash between two primal forces, and it's not. It's just not that at all. It doesn't work.
Right, because it's not set up super well, but in the movies they do a lot of setting up of things that need to be set up.
Yeah, Fade Routha gets a lot more screen time. He's not introduced to the story as there's no time jump. Infamously, Dune has a time jump.
Yeah,
so
that was a big thing.
Yeah, Fade Routha isn't introduced to the story as like a 10-year-old boy, as like he is in the book. He's introduced. Well, he's just not in the first movie, but he's introduced in this as he is when we see him on Gaiety Prime, as some stud with black inky teeth or whatever was going on with him.
Because in the book, he has like a couple bit parts in some scenes where Baron Harkonnen is like, "Ooh, I'm so evil, aren't I? I'm so evil, right, nephew?" And nephew's like, "Yes, we're so evil, uncle, yes." And then so by the time they have this big like set piece knife fight that doesn't result in anything or change anything, you're kind of like, okay. But in the movie, that is his character introduction, which I think works incredibly well.
Oh yeah. Because in the book, again, if you've never read it, if you've just seen Dune 1, all of the scenes with Piter de Vries, the evil Mentat assassin guy, Fade Routha is also in those scenes in the book, and he's just like, because Baron Harkonnen, like, he's going to be the new Baron, so he wants him around to like learn
training
how
on the job.
Secret government works. Yeah, it's on the job. It's on the job training. You don't get paid, but it is on the job.
But you do get to stab people whenever you want,
which is pretty sweet. And so
he has like, I forgot about this detail in the movie. He like kills people and like feeds it to his like harem of cannibal women. That's just
pretty
like,
sweet.
It's crazy.
I think all that stuff. I think all of the Harkonnen stuff is way better in the movie than it is in the book. Because in the book it's really obvious that this is not the part of this story that Frank Herbert cares about. He cares a lot more about like what does it mean to be a messiah, and like should you trust those in power, so that when he does have to do like what maybe feels like and I know it sort of set the groundwork, but what feels more like a traditional like here are the science fiction bad guys, it sort of sucks.
Yeah, it's very cartoony, and you're like, okay, and it's like, oh, remember these are the bad guys, and it's a scene of them like, we're bad, right? And everyone's like, yes, and then the chapter ends, and you're like, okay.
They literally sit around and like plot evilly and like snarl at each other. It's really goofy and sort of feels like it doesn't fit in with the rest of the book that does take itself very seriously.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, maybe we can go through some of the rest of the differences since we're already here.
Things that like aren't in there or were changed significantly, and sort of why.
Was there a big one aside from the time jump, which we can talk more about it, but is there a huge one that jumps out to you?
Time jump was a big thing. I don't know if there was I think one of the biggest changes I noticed that I think created a lot more conflict. I'm going to say this is sort of a two-pronged one. One is Paul being more reluctant to like go into his fate. He's like, oh, I don't want to go into the South because I know bad things happen if I like go to the South, and I'm going to start this whole thing. So he like actively tries to not do it. Whereas in the book, he's like, I can see the future, and I'm going to do this, this, and this, and then I'm going to win. And then he just sort of does it, and everyone around him is like, you go, Paul.
Yeah, there are moments in the book where the sandworm is like the one that really jumps out, and I remember really well is he is reluctant in the book, but he can't, because it's tough, it's a book, so how do you portray a character who can see the future? Like in the movie, it's funny, this thing gets called unfilmable, and now that it is filmed and it is good, it seems so obvious like how to do these like seeing the future scenes. So I'm not saying this from like I can't believe anybody hasn't figured this out before, but just the way Denis Villeneuve does it, where Paul can like sort of see the future. He gets like hints before he drinks the water of life, and so
he has this mental break, and it's like level 1 future seeing.
Yeah. And so when he does do something and realizes it's going to have repercussions, then it becomes clear and like affects him. And so he's like helping them fight and everything and whatever. And then for a time he's like, I'm not really going to fight with them anymore. I'm especially not going to go to the South because I feel like me going to this. Is that in the book? Do I just not remember that at all? So in the movie, and if this is in the book, hey, we read a lot on this fucking show. You forget. Hey, I got Silmarillion on the brain, not Dune on the brain right now. So, Stilgar is like from the South, and the South are like fanatical about the.
I don't think that's in the book at all.
No, because Chani is all in on it too.
Yeah, if it is, it's like maybe one line, and then it's never relevant again. But like this was the second part of that. Paul being reluctant is changing Chani to be like, hey, I don't know about all this Messiah stuff, guys. Like that is not her in the book. She's all like, yay, Paul, I'm in love with you now. Go do your stuff.
The flip side is also making Jessica a lot more fanatical than like the sort of neutral opinion she has in the book about. Because even when she becomes the Reverend Mother in the book, she's still not like all in. She's like, this is pretty fucked up, huh? And Paul even has moments where he's like, no, it's like they flipped it in the movie where because in the movie Jessica is begging Paul to come to the South with her, and Paul really doesn't want to, and he's like really mad that he knows he has to use these people, but his plan is to use them to kill the Baron, and then that's it. Yeah. And then he, through events in the movie, sort of realizes that that's not going to work, and he does have to become the Quetzalcoatl, but
an emperor of the universe and all that stuff.
Yeah. But yeah, Chani being a detractor is a big difference, and one I think is such a smart, like,
I know,
such a smart decision, because she, like, we talked about it a lot in the book, like the way Frank Herbert writes women, because in the like literary canon, like the Bene Gesserit, you're like, oh wow, it's like a powerful sect of women, and it's like, yes, but there are also other women in the book, and it's not really handled with such like grace that some of these white women characters are treated with.
Right. And in the book, there's like this sense that like, oh, this is a more independent culture and the women have more power. But then immediately it's like, oh no, like the women just sort of go with what the men say, which I think in the movies, that sort of culture is taken like is more consistent. Like Frank Herbert like set up a culture of like, oh, everyone's a warrior, but then like the second the male protagonist needs a romantic interest, they're all like princesses all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Whereas like in the movie, I think like Denis Villeneuve stuck to his guns of like, hey, if these like women are gonna be like powerful warriors who are fighting with the men, like that's gonna be consistent. They're not gonna turn into, you know, a bunch of passive objects once a white guy comes along.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. It's also good. It's an interesting change that it almost feels like he didn't know. Correct me if I'm wrong. When Denis Villeneuve made the first Dune, he did not know if he was going to be allowed to make a second one, right?
I think so.
That at least, like, at the time, I remember being like, I remember hearing the news like a year later that Dune 2 is confirmed and being like,
right,
what?
Right.
Because in Dune 1, everybody remembers Dune 1, Zendaya's perfume commercial that is edited throughout the entire thing. And I just rewatched some of Dune 1 and the tent scene in particular, and like, every time he sees Chani, she's like smiling and like beckoning him with open arms. And so it almost feels like Denis Villeneuve, like, because Chani's not in, she is in it, but she has barely any lines and is only in like the last 15 minutes of the first Dune one. It almost feels like when he approached writing the script for the second one, he sort of went back and like changed that or retconned it, because she is not like a welcoming figure to Paul. She like likes him for him because he's like a handsome little boy or whatever, but she doesn't like him because for his like power or his like messianic forces.
Yeah. Which is like, and in fact, the more that he does embrace that, the less she like jives with him, and it like that hurts her, and that's a point of conflict. Versus in the book, Paul can just do whatever he wants, and all the women in his life are like, yes, good, Paul, we love you.
Yeah, and it makes me really excited for how they'll handle Dune Messiah, because that was a big problem. Like, we talked about this a lot, but like the Princess Irulan Chani like weird love triangle is not it. There's no way it's going to be like that in the movie, so I'm really looking forward to how they do that.
Yeah, because at the end of the movie, Chani like leaves.
Yeah, she leaves.
And she sees that and this, I love this. It like when Paul is like the day before, Paul's like, Chani, I love you forever. And then when he confronts the Emperor, he's like, yeah, Princess Irulan, I'm going to marry you. And Chani's like, what the heck? And she sees that as a betrayal, not as a, oh, well, Paul, you just have to do what you have to do. Because throughout the whole book, Chani's very like, oh, well, I see that you have to do this, so I'll just go along with it. But I think her change also really highlights one of the criticisms about like the book that we had is that it's so like white savior critical that it seems like it's just a straight white savior story. But making Chani more critical against what Paul's doing really brings like what the story's actually about, like makes it more obvious about like, hey, this might actually kind of be a problem, and is Paul the good guy? Especially when it's compared with Stilgar, because I think you sort of see the transformation of Stilgar from friend to like fanatic.
Oh my god, yeah, it's
but
incredible.
Then you also have Chani be like from friend to like dissenter, like someone who's not in on it. So I think that works super well, and that's not in the books at all.
No, it's not, because what the books do is Paul is way more of a dickhead like 24/7, so it's really obvious that like he's not the good guy. Like he's a dickhead after he has his like mental break in the tent. He's like a omnipresent like prick, pretty much. He's mean to everybody, he's frustrated all the time, and so from that point of view, it's like obvious that he's not the good guy. And I think it's like, as we talked about, can be a little so obvious where it's like, okay, all right, yeah, we get it. But he the book having like its message being don't trust like your leaders or whatever, or don't take like what these people say to you at face value. I think it works, but having the movie be, because there's 5 of these fucking books, and Denis Villeneuve, I imagine, does not imagine a world in which in 7 years Dune Chapter House comes out. Like,
right.
I don't think so. Like, kind of condensing this stuff into the, I guess, sorry, I'm all over the place. In the movie, Paul is very reluctant, so it makes it very obvious when he's no longer reluctant that it's a bad thing.
Yeah.
In the book, Paul is not reluctant
ever,
and everybody around him like is propping him up. And at the end of the book, they win, and everything looks good. So some people might call that subtle. I am of the opinion that the metaphor gets muddled. It's still there.
I agree.
And then that's why Dune Messiah is like way explicit with like, no, he is the bad guy. It like starts and he's like, I killed 67 billion people.
Right.
And so, because I just think because the book Dune is trying to do a lot, like too much, and then Dune Messiah focuses on, I mean, it's called Dune Messiah. It focuses on that part of the story.
On Paul specifically. And the movies really, I think, focus on Paul in the way that the Dune Messiah book focused on Paul.
Yeah.
Because it focuses on like what his actions mean, like in the grand scheme of things, and to the people around him, rather than just it being viewed as, oh, he's winning, so it's good. The hero is winning and everyone's happy about it. Versus in the movie, it really feels like, oh, the hero's winning, but it's kind of like he also doesn't want to win. In the movie, his sort of second mental break in part 2 is when he drinks the water of life, the hallucinogenic worm juice poison, and that is in this new movie built up a lot better too, where like Jessica wants him to take it and he doesn't want to take it, where in the book it's
we also
like
watch it happen, because in the book it doesn't happen on the page.
In the book it's like, oh, it's Wednesday at 2 and Paul is unconscious, and you're like, what?
Yeah.
But that whole like him after that, like having a full shift, like it really felt like after that he's Dune Messiah Paul, where he's like, he's like harrowed by all the stuff he knows will happen that he has to do, but he's also powerless to stop himself from doing it. Like I think it was really good, and Timothée Chalamet did an incredible job playing that.
Definitely.
It was wild.
Because the movie does a really smart thing where we spend a lot of time with Paul and his conflicting feelings about this, and then as soon as he drinks the water, we don't really spend any more time with Paul, and like we see him instantly like transform into this figure where like he feels detached from us, the audience, because we literally can't understand what he's doing because he knows everything. Like he literally knows everything. And so I think that's such a good decision. So like when we reach the knife fight scene, like the implications of what is going to happen in that throne room, we've read the books, we know. I'd be interested to see like if somebody just watched these movies, if the implication of like him becoming the emperor is as big a deal as like to them as it is to us, because we know like he says it right, he's like, oh my god, the galaxy's gonna be in flames, but like what does that mean? Like we don't see that in the movie, but in the book, I mean, that's a huge fucking deal and will like destroy the universe. But
and the knife fight at the end in the book,
so cool, by the way.
In the book, like I found like was almost anticlimactic and lacks tension, because you're like, is the guy who's been right about everything and won everything up until this point really going to lose this knife fight? But in the movie, because of all the stuff we've been talking about, like his reluctancy, and now he's like gung-ho, and like the fact that Fade Routha is built up better as like his rival in these different factions, like the Harkonnens, and like there's this whole backstory about like the Bene Gesserit have been breeding, and like Fade Routha is a candidate to be the Kwisatz Haderach. And so like this conflict, like Paul knows he's going to win. Right. But for him, it's like, oh, what does this display mean? Like as a performance to the people around him, for what it's going to have the implication for his future. And I think that comes across better in the movie, rather than in the book where it's like, oh, it's a lightsaber fight and he wins and then he wins, you know?
He does just win pretty definitively in the book. Like, in the movie, he gets, like, stabbed and the shit kicked out of him. And,
yeah.
And like what you said, Danilo, it certainly be, you could watch it and be like, he's performing this. Like, he lets himself be stabbed and he lets himself be, like, punched and kicked so that he's like performing like professional wrestling. Like, he's getting the audience to like believe in what he's doing is real, so that when he kills Feyd-Rautha in like a move that we've seen attempted earlier in the movie when he fights the slave, where they like both go in to try to, because like Paul catches Feyd-Rautha's knife.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, Paul catches Feyd-Rautha's knife and like slips the knife that he's holding, that he was stabbed with before, like into his into Feyd-Rautha's tummy wummy. And so it sort of mirrors like how Feyd-Rautha fights on Gaiety Prime, where he like gets like all up in your face because you have to, because there's this dumbass energy shields or whatever in Dune,
right?
Also, in the book, there's this hilarious moment where Frank Herbert sort of realizes the shields are stupid, and so he deactivates his shield at the end of the movie so the knife fight can have stakes. In this, he just doesn't have the shield to begin with, so you never think about that. Yep. And that shield part happens on Gaiety Prime, where he like turns it off to like have it be a fair fight. And it works way better than it does in the book, because the shields are silly. I'm
just so
still
interested in. I just thought about this, like, the symbolism of the different knife fights, because what happens in Dune 2, Paul keeps flashing back to Jameis at the end, which is the climax of the first movie. It'd be cool to see, like, or you said you rewatched it again, like, how the beats of that knife fight reflect the climax of Dune 2, because like, I think it's cool to have knife fights be like the hinge point of so much like character and meaning in a technological world with laser guns, you know?
Yeah.
And so I like how the movies paid special attention to, it's not who wins. It's not the fact that it's a cool fight. It's like what it means for who's involved and who's watching it, and what the result means for whoever wins or loses, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's cool. And there's no weird part at the end of the book where Jessica and Shani are like, hey, welcome to the family, Princess Irulan.
We're all sort of like Paul's concubines, and then the book ends. The movies did not end that way.
There's a...
go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I just have a list. I remember specifically one of us saying when we were watching it, like, oh, we wish we could see Beast Raban governing Arrakis so that we can see what it'd be different under Feyd-Rautha, and we literally see that almost right away. And it's like, perfect. We knew we needed that. We knew we wanted it, and that's what we got.
Yeah, Beast Raban, played by Dave Bautista.
That was awesome.
Yeah, it is awesome. He plays such a good, like, insecure big man. Like, the way he's described in the book, I think Baron Harkonnen says he's like a weak-minded muscle man, and it's like perfect. Dave Bautista's work, obviously he was being directed, he's working off of one line that Beast Raban has, and he creates this like whole character who's like insecure. We see him like retreat at a point and like have real fear. I don't know. It's awesome. Like, all those parts of the film are really good. And when he kisses Feyd-Rautha's boots, like, that's so... Oh, man. Yeah. It's so good.
Feyd-Rautha and Baron Harkonnen have a couple lip kisses, which is very funny.
Yeah, you get to see a man kiss his uncle, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Thufir Hawat isn't in the movie at all.
Yeah. Oh, here's another big change. This is the betrayal subplot with Gurney Halleck and Thufir Hawat. Where they're all like, oh, Jessica was the result of this, and then Gurney Halleck comes back and tries to kill Jessica, and Paul like beats him up, and then Gurney's like crying, begging forgiveness. I'm so happy that's not in there. That was my absolute least favorite part of the book.
Yep. Gurney Halleck, all the rest of Gurney Halleck stuff though is directly straight from the book. It's like. Yep. It's really good.
Although Paul did not kill all of his new friends. He specifically kept them alive. I noticed that too. Because in the book, when Paul and the Fremen attack Gurney Halleck in his smuggler outfit, they kill all the smugglers except for like 2 of them, and Gurney Halleck's like, my friends.
And there's this really goofy moment in the book where they take them back to like Fremen jail. Like they have like some survivors. Oh, is this how this goes? Where he's like, Paul's like, I think some of them are Sardaukar.
Yeah,
and,
that's right. Yeah.
And Gurney Halleck's like, how do you know? And then this is not a joke. The Sardaukar throw a knife at Paul and he catches it and it has the symbol for Sardaukar on it.
It says we are Sardaukar.
So they make I will say, I think it's like reverse stormtroopers. The Sardaukar in the book are seem way more threatening than they do in the movie, because every time we see them in the movie they're getting like pulled under the sand by the Fremen and like the absolute shit beaten out of them,
which in the book
cool.
It's played like, oh, the Sardaukar are great but the Fremen can fuck them up, and that shows a lot about the Fremen. But if in the movie all you see is Sardaukar being beat up by Fremen, it doesn't really come across that that's a big deal. They just seem like a bunch of idiots. That intro shot of when they fly up on the thing, I was that was so cool.
That's the Baron soldiers.
Those
are just the Harkonnens. But they do. Oh yeah, here's something in the movie. They have they don't have jetpacks. They have like anti-gravity boots or something where they just kind of like float around. Yeah, it's really cool.
It's cool. It seems dumb, but it's actually very cool and kind of like creepy and off-putting, and it's yeah.
The other big change, we said there's no time jump. A big reason for the time jump in the book is to age up Paul's sister so she's not an infant the entire time. The way the movie gets around this is that Aaliyah doesn't get born at all in the movie. We see her in like a flash forward, but she is not... I mean, she has dialogue, but it's from her womb. It's from Jessica's womb.
Yeah, and I think that was like a perfect... Like, I think that's such a good change, because then you don't need her, like... Because at the end of the book, she kills Baron Harkonnen.
Yeah.
But it's so much more satisfying to have Paul kill Baron Harkonnen. Mm-hmm. And so, because you don't need Aaliyah to kill Baron Harkonnen, you just don't need to have Aaliyah at all. And so, but there's still the creepy scenes of when they're talking to each other, like Paul and Jessica and Aaliyah, like from the womb. So now the reason there's a talking baby is because when Jessica becomes a Reverend Mother, she drinks the water of life, which is like the hallucinogenic worm poison, and her like fetus gains consciousness as well. And so they start talking to each other. And there's a lot of creepy scenes where like Jessica's walking around with like her hands on her stomach, like muttering to her like unborn child. It's awesome. And then you get around the whole like, because like in the David Lynch Dune, it's like a kid with a CGI face and it looks really bad, and it's just, there's no good way to do it, but I think this way is like the best way to do it while preserving the creepiness of having a talking baby.
Because in the next movie she will just be like, okay, if you're just listening to this for the first time, Aaliyah like ages really fast. So like, sure, she's 12, but she looks like she's 27, so it's okay. And so this, like, we can just sort of skip all that, and we can just have like Dune Messiah can take place. The movie can take place at any. We don't need to make her like aged up weirdly quick. Like, it's so smart. She can just be 25. Like,
it can just take place in, because like there will be a time jump between
there has
Dune 2 and Dune 3. Oh yeah, Paul also then, because no time jump, Paul also doesn't have a son with Chani, who is then killed off screen randomly. We never meet and is killed off screen.
Leto.
Yeah.
I forgot about that. But I remember, so I was sitting in the theater watching the movie, and they destroy Siege Tabor. Yeah. And I remember being like, man, why do I remember this being weird and bad in the book? And then I was like, oh, right, it's because his son is there that we never see.
Uh-huh.
I don't know. Maybe it's just because... Listen, I'm about to say something that's going to sound really stupid. There's less talking in this movie than there is in the book. Now,
Yeah.
The big down part of Dune is that Frank Herbert is not a very good writer. So when characters are talking to each other, it's usually the worst part. This, though, I also still think the dialogue in this movie is the worst part. I don't think it's bad, but I think, like, compared to everything else, like, this movie looks crazy. Like,
yeah.
Like,
but the dialogue does do a lot of lifting, and there's
God,
some points where, like, it does have to really be on the nose. Like, if there is, like, a weakness of it, it's like, you know, like, because at the end of when there's the big confrontation with the Emperor, and Christopher Walken's like, I killed your father because he had a good heart.
Yeah,
and it's okay, whatever.
There's a lot of really good. We get to meet Lady Fenring.
Oh my God!
No Count Fenring,
because they have a horrible scene in the book where they're like speaking in code to each other with like ums and ers and whatever.
It's so stupid.
And we're like, there's no way that's in the book. And then we saw this movie together, and as soon as she said Lady Fenring, we both looked at each other and went like, oh, Lady Fenring's in this.
Because she's sitting with a bunch of other women, and I was like, I don't see Count Fenring. This is obviously the greatest movie of all time, because they're not going to have that dumbass conversation like they do in the book.
And she has like a legitimate purpose instead of being like, yes, we also engage in political subterfuge, which is the whole point of that scene. But her point is like, she's a Bene Gesserit, and she seduces Feyd-Rautha and is pregnant with his child so that the Bene Gesserit like genetic project to get the Kwisatz Haderach can continue even if Feyd-Rautha dies.
Yeah, they let me look something up here. That kid is Brian Herbert creation. That's in like one of those weird awful novels that comes later, Feyd-Rautha's and Lady Fenring's kid.
Oh, really?
So I wonder if that is just put in there to have it be to make it clear to the audience that they're still trying to make a Kwisatz Haderach that's not crazy, or like not that's like easily controllable, because if they can just make him grow up on the fucking Emperor planet, then I'm sure they could control it really easy. The issue was they let Paul be raised by Leto, like the best, most perfect guy of all time.
And I think part of that is also adds to the Feyd-Rautha setup as like, oh, this is a guy who's like potentially on the same level as Paul, because like the fact that the Bene Gesserit treat him as like important and worthy of maintaining, it just like adds more Feyd-Rautha lore versus like, oh, he's also a young man but he's evil, therefore he is Paul's rival, you know. And I think that's sort of how it feels like in the books, whereas the movie does a little bit better job of setting him up as like, oh, he is a mirror to Paul in a lot of ways, like through the Bene Gesserit, through the Harkonnen stuff.
No, it is. One cool thing about the Harkonnens I just wanted to talk about for a little bit. The Harkonnens are dressed in like all black, and they all look gray and are weird looking. And in the first movie, you might just be like, oh, they're just like evil. Of course, they're like dressed in all black and they're gray. And then we get to see their home planet. In the trailer, Gaiety Prime is in black and white, and you might be like, oh, that's an interesting artistic choice. And it is, but there's like a reason it's in black and white. It's because the sun is black.
Yeah, it's the black sun.
Right, so the light that it casts when they're outside, the only color people on Gaiety Prime can see are black and white. So all of their clothes are either black or white, and all of their buildings are only black or white. And there's these really incredible shots of like characters either walking through a hallway lit by the sun or walking from inside to outside in the sun, and they're like in color, and then they become like black and white.
It's
oh my god, cool. It's so fucking cool. And that's like not in the book, but what a fun choice that doesn't change or hurt anything.
It just adds like, more to the
so cool.
And I don't know, we talked about this, like the language part of it, of Dune 2, like there was a lot of Fremen talking, like Timothée Chalamet, like doing full speeches in Fremen. Like I honestly did not expect that much language. And then like the Harkonnens speaking their little Harkonnen language, and like it's super creepy and weird. Like I loved all that. Like there's a shit ton of subtitles, and it's super effective, which they didn't have to do. Like Denis Villeneuve could have been like, oh, they all speak English. But it adds so much more to the experience. I love that.
Yeah, it's very cool. All the little details and stuff. What a cool. They even provide an in-lore reason why Javier Bardem has an accent and like Chani doesn't. It's like you didn't have to do
South,
that,
and he has a different accent. Yeah.
They didn't have to do any of that, but they did, and it like makes it feel like it just really feels like they care. And for somebody who maybe had Dune built up for them as like, oh, it's like the greatest sci-fi novel of all time, bro, and was pretty let down by it. I enjoy Dune Messiah a lot, but the Dune is like fine. Seeing this, like this is what people
Dune is.
Yeah, this is what Dune is. There's also no the two Spacing Guild guys at the end of the book that
which
we see them in the first movie.
People have criticized not having the Spacing Guild in these movies because it like doesn't get across why the spice is important.
Which is
I sort of see where they're coming from, but like it is sort of like the Chome Company, which also isn't mentioned at all, where it's like, yes, it is relevant to like the wider lore and political landscape, but like it's not relevant to the story at hand. Like it is almost fine to know like spice is important and valuable, and that's all you sort of need to know. And like, as I imagine, because Dune Messiah has at its center a conspiracy that is partially run by someone from the Spacing Guild, like, we're gonna get all that through there. So we don't really need to spend so much time on it in this one.
And, I think that is when we'll get a lot of that stuff. It'll be a lot more like they're obviously gonna have to do in the book. Somebody who can see the future cannot see what somebody else who can see in the future is doing, and vice versa. And that's obviously going to be a huge
convenient.
Part. It's very convenient. But that's obviously going to be important. The Spacing Guild stuff, there's a scene in the first one where they are like traveling, and like the way that Denis Villeneuve has chosen to portray what like warp speed would look like, because in the book they describe it as like space folds in on itself. I don't know if you remember this, Danilo, but the Spacing Guild ship, from one side of it looks like a big cylinder, and through it you can see the other like solar system or something. So like they just like travel through it and are instantly there. And I think that does a really good job of like, well, yeah, obviously only these people can do. How the fuck did we do that? Because like we're so conditioned with like science fiction to be like, it's like Star Wars. It's like you just press the button and you can go wherever. But it's cool when it feels like it's like magic, and that's what like the spice is it's pretty much magic. It literally like awakens the magical abilities lying dormant within some people.
And narratively, like to have, because as from what I remember is like there is a lot more info about the Spacing Guild and all that in the first movie, and it's relevant then because our main characters are literally switching planets. Whereas in this movie, in Dune 2, the characters aren't switching planets, so adding a bunch of Spacing Guild stuff and lore would almost be like shoehorning it in because it's not really relevant to their current
it's not relevant
situation.
Because you already know it like doesn't matter how the Emperor got to he's the fucking Emperor. Like the only person who goes from planet to planet in this is the Baron Harkonnen, but we never see that. We just see the Emperor, and he just does it. He's got a cool ball spaceship.
He's his like, because in the book it's like a weird metal tent. It's like described, and I think they portrayed it perfectly. I'm like, of course that's how it would look. It's this crazy silver ball, and then he has a little city underneath it.
Yeah, I know. Like that's
and it shakes when there's stuff happening.
Cool.
Like it's very good. So it's like it's clearly a temporary structure.
Right, exactly. And we do actually get the scene that's just in the book of like the big hole opens up and then like Paul and company enter. But like in the way it does in the movie, we also got to see the huge battle outside and glimpses of the battle that happens in Arrakeen. We get the payoff of Gurney Halleck killing Beast Raban. He says he does that in the book, but like we actually get to see it.
Because Frank
and it's
Herbert
a payoff.
loves when people talk about what they did instead of just showing us what they did.
They portray really well like
how brutal the plan is.
It's like, really violent.
how violent it is and how fast it is and how it all works. Like, according to plan. Like, they blow up the wall, the storm comes in, they ride in on sandworms, and it's like epic and fast, and then like soon, like, then Paul is in the throne room with a knife, you know, and it's like, holy shit. Versus in the book, it almost technically that is how it happens in the book, but that's also how everything in the book happens, so it doesn't feel as cool earned to like all of a sudden like, oh shit, like he just did it, you know. And that's like in the movie that's portrayed as like kind of a terrifying power thing rather than our hero did a great job once again.
Right. It's literally desert power. They talk about it. That's the phrase constantly used in the book. Is like Duke Leto is. He says the Harkonnens have land power. We have air power. What the winner of that needs is desert power, and he means the Fremen. In the first movie, you do see a lot of like the Fremen, maybe not a lot, but more than this, of like because in that, like, the Fremen are like the quote unquote bad guys still. You see them like pop out and like kill people, and you're like, oh shit, they're really scary. In this movie, we spend a lot of time with them, so it becomes like more and more normal. And then in the final battle, it's mostly from the perspective of like the Sardaukar on the ground and the Emperor. So it is like crazy when they're like walking and then just suddenly like, how did they get there? The Fremen just like stand up out of the sand and just like start hacking away.
And it really portrays how like the rest of the Empire and how they do everything is so woefully ill prepared for this style of warfare. Which then, when they go on their big jihad, would make sense why it's so violent and so effective, because no one in the galaxy is prepared for this fighting style. And this is like that in micro almost.
Yeah. We actually get to see them start it kind of made me laugh. I would assume, like, in the book, Paul didn't start his jihad instantly after he became the Emperor.
No, and I clocked this because I think it was like, because also in the book, like the movie, all the great houses are like in orbit, right?
Yes, they are. Yeah, because they're gonna nuke. They're like we're just gonna we're not you. So what? You're the Emperor. Like, we'll just kill you and get the Emperor back.
Yeah, but then he becomes Emperor because he marries Irulan, and then from what I remember, he sends a message to the houses, and they're like, great.
Yeah, but so long as he does it like officially, they don't care who the Emperor is.
Yeah, but in the movie, they like reject him, and so he has to like fight, and then that's where this war starts, which I think is a great like forward that sets up, you know, a horrible atrocity.
Yeah, they like the movie ends with them getting on their ships to presumably slaughter just like
anyone in their way.
Yeah. Who doesn't like bend the knee? I would assume they get a chance, but I would hope so. He is the bad guy, so I don't know.
And Paul just knows, like, Timothée Chalamet did such a good job. He just knows, he's like, well, then this is what we're doing. Like, he just knows that this is how it has to be, and this is what they're gonna do. It's crazy.
Yeah, it was awesome. Everything, almost like, couldn't have asked for a better adaptation of this.
Well, and we didn't even talk about the sandworm riding scene, because that's earlier.
God.
And like that's an excellent sequence. Like I expected it to be sort of like it's portrayed in the trailer, where like, oh, that's a big sandworm, and then he just does it and then is good. But like the whole sequence of like the build up to it, and then when he's on it, like trying to maneuver it, and like he keeps hitting these dunes and it's so sandy and he can't see anything. Like, I think that was just incredible. And again, he didn't have to do it, but it's such an iconic scene from such an iconic story. The fact that they spent the time on it, I think Timothée Chalamet said, is like, there was the worm crew and I was on the worm rig, and we spent 4 months shooting that 3-minute scene.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, you can tell. I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah, completely.
And it's he really, because like in the book, obviously it's important, it's like the biggest sandworm of all time, but when you see the movie, like even you, the audience, are like, okay, maybe he is, even knowing like
yes,
the Lisan al-Gaib is like a fake thing made by the Bene Gesserit, and all of this like terrible stuff that's going on, even you are like, because taken by the power of cinema, are like, okay, but he can do no wrong. Because I've seen like, I don't know if like discourse is dead and media literacy is in the trash, but I've seen people unironically like come out of this film still of the opinion that Paul is the good guy. and I think that like that's not a fault of the movie. That's like the movie's doing its job. Like the movie is about somebody starting a propaganda campaign about like how they are the chosen one. And people are falling for it in real life. It doesn't have like the same. It doesn't have the same implication of like when people get Starship Troopers wrong and like think that that's for real. Because then it's like, okay, but fascism is real and happening right now all around us, and like prejudice. It's more like you cast. I just think it's so genius. You cast like, people can argue about this, but objectively one of the most beautiful people in Hollywood right now.
At the very least, like a charismatic movie star, leading man.
Yeah. And then he's being charismatic. Like the scene where he convinces, like he stands up to challenge like the way that the Fremen have these debates, and it looks like they're all going to turn on him and kill him. And then he starts like being prophetic and like telling people. He does
the exact right move he needs to.
Yeah. It's just so you get taken with him. It's like, not to sound like, you know, every liberal on the internet, but it's like how did Donald Trump become so fucking popular? It's because he like knew exactly what to say to the exact type of person. It's like if you walked out of the movie or read the book and were like, well, I still don't get it. He's like the good guy. Imagine if like an alien race like gave us 4chan and like Twitter and stuff, and then they were like, hey, have you seen Pepe the Frog? And they're like, oh, whoa, Pepe the Frog is pretty cool. And then like it's like, God, it's so smart.
This is, you know, you were saying we could have a more nuanced discussion about this. Like, Paul isn't like the good guy as like the hero, but he does seem like part of the story is like he's a good guy. And like all these systems and plans and like structures that he's a part of just lead him to this like terrible end. And like you were just comparing it to Donald Trump a little bit. Like Donald Trump isn't a smart or strategic man. He's just like, for whatever reason, our social world and where we are technologically and societally, him just being who he is, like, it resulted in what happened and what keeps happening. And that's sort of what happened to Paul. Like, he just
definitely what's happening to Paul, yeah.
What the best he could based on who he was, but like everything around him like sort of fit together perfectly to like push him to this horrible end.
Yeah, it's like if Jesus Christ came back, but then we found out that like, oh, none of the stuff in the Bible, like the Bible was written to make us like believe in somebody to lead us astray. Like that's literally what in Dune is happening.
Yeah.
And then the really smart thing is that, but Paul is actually the chosen one. So like, what does it? And like, this is where the question that Frank Herbert's not a good writer, but this is like the question he's trying to get at is like, the Kwisatz Haderach is a real, or can be a real person, or a real being who has real power. But the Lisan al-Gaib is fake. But is it fake? Because he is the Kwisatz Haderach, and like, who's to say that's not fake? And like,
because it is fake. Because the Bene Gesserit decided they wanted to make one, and so they've been trying to make one. And then, like, is it a chosen one? If the bunch of people whose job it is to choose, then yeah, he's the chosen one because everyone said he is.
It's perfect. Yeah. Oh my god,
it's good. And like, that's the props to Denis Villeneuve for like that is what is so unique and fascinating about this story and Frank Herbert's story. Like, and just sticking with that and having that be the main core. And like all the changes have sort of serve to like highlight that and make it more obvious. So we're not talking about like, oh, hey, the emperor has to liquidate his CHOAM company holdings. Like, Like,
I know,
who cares?
we get to talk
Who
about
cares?
We get to talk about the interesting parts.
Right.
The worst part of the movie is that Christopher Walken plays the Emperor. Unfortunately.
It's also the best, but also he's
also the
just
best
Christopher
part of the
Walken.
movie. I also will never be able to see it differently. So
right.
there's that.
Oh, we didn't mention this earlier, but another thing that was cut was, Jameis's wife and his like two little boys. Because when Paul kills Jameis, he gets back to like the Fremen in the book, and they're like, "Oh, you get his wife now," and then that's a whole thing. But that's not in here, which
And he
is
gets
like
his coffee
good.
set.
Yeah.
I love when people are still trying to tell me like, no, but Dune is good actually, and it's like, look at all the stuff that's not in it. Like, the movie is good. Look at all the stuff that's not in it.
There's no Jameis's wife. There's no Count Fenring. There's no Chome Company Holdings. There's no Gurney Halleck weeping at Jessica's feet for like
there's no like sexy 5-year-old, but she's really 15-year-old. It's like,
right, and there's no she won't fit in at school. There's not a whole chapter about that. So I guess in conclusion, I would say, if you haven't read the book yet and you watched this movie and you liked it and you're hoping that, all the interesting things about the movie, I wonder if I'd read this book and it's going to just add more depth and expound on it. It does not.
Yeah.
In fact, I think the movie explores the things that the book's trying to explore way better.
Yep. 100,000%.
If you want more random stuff, then read the book. But
if you
it's
want
not
more
like
lore, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not the Lord of the Rings. It's not like Tom Bombadil. It's not like the omission of Tom Bombadil from the Fellowship of the Ring equals the omission of Jameis's kids or Count Fenring from this. It's like no.
It's just more stuff. Like, like if you want more stuff, the book has more stuff, but it doesn't have more like, ooh, I really liked that the tension between Fade Routha and Lady Fenring, and I wonder if it gets more like that scene's not in the book.
Right.
So like you're not going to get more of that stuff. It's just not in the book.
So I would if you are interested in the lore of Dune, there's more of it in the book. Yeah. But if you are interested in like, this is the perfect distillation of the ideas that Frank Herbert wanted to expound. He was doing like, he's like a crazy old man doing cocaine, and like that's and the book is published by fucking car. It's like a car manual. Like, no, it's not good. And people, I don't know. The movie is. This is the only movie in the history of the world that the movie is better than the book.
I know. Well, because I think when people say the book is good, they're talking about the stuff that we're talking about in the movie that they see in the book. No one's living for Count and Lady Fendring talking with ums and ahs. No one's like, but I love Jameis's wife. It's such a wonderful sexist character. No one's saying that.
Yeah, yeah. The only thing that the book doesn't really have any of is the ecological part. There is a part in the movie where, and it's the same as the book, where people's water gets returned to the big well, and there's like 27,000 of these wells across the planet, and Stilgar, like part of the prophecy is that the Lizan Al Gaib is going to make it into a green planet. Now, that doesn't happen in the book, but in the movie, like Paul, like that's what the last thing he says to people. He's like, to the green paradise, and then like so it's like his like call to action is like, if we slaughter the interlopers, we will make the planet beautiful again.
And that part of it is in the book. I would say like the ecological part is probably equally in the movies as it is in the book.
There's like that whole bit in the book with Dr. Yui walking through the desert, dying.
Liet Kynes.
Walking through the desert and pondering, like, oh my god, I don't think it's a good idea if we try to change the ecology of this planet. And that's not in this. And it is a part of the book that I find like particularly good and powerful. So that might be the only thing where like,
but I
is
think
not in it.
Well, the one thing about Dune Messiah is that like, in Dune Messiah, they had already started terraforming stuff, and like I think it's more potent to be like, oh, here are the results of that thing we thought was good now wreaking horrible effects on our lives and culture and ecology. Because, like, how it's portrayed in the movies and sort of in the book, like, yeah, the desert's bad. It's a good thing if we make it more livable. And then they do. And in Dune Messiah, it's like, oh, but now all the worms are dying. And so spice is more rare. And everyone's like, I don't feel like I've lost connection to the desert because there's less desert, So it's all that stuff that's fascinating. I think that there'll be a lot more of that in the third movie, I'm sure.
And I'm very excited to see because I do think, I don't know if I really like Dune Messiah. I really, really like it. I don't know if I like it so much where I would suggest it under the condition that you unfortunately do have to read Dune to get to Dune Messiah.
Yeah. I don't think you could watch the first two movies and then read Dune Messiah.
No. But if you are really interested in this lore, Dune Messiah is excellent. But you probably do have to read. I say if you have seen these two movies, you could probably speed read Dune and sort of get it. There's just a couple things. There's a couple things that I don't want to spoil that happen in Dune Messiah that are really, really important. That maybe aren't in the movie and blah blah blah. Aaliyah is the big one, but
yeah.
I mean that's all I have to say about Dune 2. I think
good movie. It was awesome. I'm gonna go see it again.
Is it? Do you think the best book to or a movie being made from a book ever?
I mean, I don't know how many where I've like read the book and then seen the movie, but it's got to be up there. Yeah, probably the best I've seen.
Or it's this or Lord of the Rings. Like people are already drawing the comparison that like this is our Lord of the Rings. Like,
I mean, having watched the movies and then read Lord of the Rings, I mean, I still prefer the books now.
But definitely.
I can't say there's a universe where I prefer the Dune books to these movies.
No, and I don't think that. I think Dune is playing with with more interesting and relatable ideas than the Lord of the Rings novels are. However, Lord of the Rings is written well, and that is the difference. And it's like a story. It's stories about different stuff,
right? But
at the end of the day, Lord of the Rings is just literally, objectively a better book.
Literarily, it's higher quality than we'll say. Tolkien's novel wasn't edited by someone doing a Toyota manual or whatever.
Yeah, crazy.
Like, we really need to know how these. What is Tom Bombadil?
Yeah, what is and what kind of oil does he take? How do you make Tom Bombadil tick?
It's so funny. I'm on the Chilton Company Wikipedia page, and it's like all about like their profits and they created business magazines, and there's one small paragraph that's like fiction publishing, and it says Dune and The Witches of Caras.
Did they just do the first one?
I don't know.
They did.
It's just
Putnam
the first one?
Publishing published Dune Messiah.
That's hilarious.
That is crazy. Wow, well, there you have it, folks.
Well, if you're ever out there writing a novel, your debut novel, maybe because Herbert needed more cocaine money, so that he's like, first buyer, I'll sell this book to.
That's true. I mean, if you are doing cocaine and trying to buy the newest, most beautiful looking copy of the Quran you probably do need a lot of money.
What was the quote you told me the other day?
It was a TikTok video I saw. I don't have it on me, but shout out.
It's not a direct quote. It's just a joke, right? Yeah.
It was like modern people talking about Dune. And he's like, well, it's actually a story about how we're not supposed to trust these demagogues or messianic figures that pop up in pop culture. And then it said, Frank Herbert circa 1960, the only thing I love more than the beautiful smell of cocaine is the luxurious holy light of Islam.
And I don't know if there's a better way of describing the difference between the book and the movie than those two sentiments. I think you can get all you need to know from that.
I know, it's perfect.
The book is cocaine and Islam. The movie is like, maybe we shouldn't trust our leaders, you know?
Oh my god, it's like perfect. Oh, well, hardheads, you know what the deal is. Please leave us a 5-star review if you write a funny review. Or you had any problems with what we said, still leave a 5-star review and we'll read it out.
We'll read it live on the air.
Yep, and we'll talk about it. You can follow us on Instagram at Hardcover Hooligans. You can also follow us, or I was going to say follow us on Gmail. You can send us an email at hardcoverhooligans@gmail.com. As always, my name is McIntyre.
And I'm Danilo. And this ends our first ever Hardcover Hooligans special reports.
If you liked what you saw or want, I don't know, it's kind of fun talking about movies about the books.
Yeah, fuck books.
Yeah, fuck the books. But I think it'd be fun to do Lord of the Rings. I don't know.
Yeah, we can do more. Even though we talked a lot about the differences when we read the books.
Well, that's true. So, but maybe we'll do something weird. Maybe we'll read Starship Troopers and then do the movie.
Yeah, or like Blade Runner or something. If anyone's listening to this and is like, that'd be an interesting discussion. If you like read the book, watch the movie, we could do like a bonus episode on that or something.
And when Mistborn comes out, we're going to be talking about that. So, anyway, stay hard, everybody.
Stay hard, folks.